Now, one can think of this along the simplest pedagogical models. By that I mean the classroom models. I mean, I ought to know this from teaching the university. I know how to pass along knowledge. To get someone to believe me in the last analysis, I give them an A, which I could replace with a happy face. They're used to that. That's from kindergarten. They're both just symbols, right, of achievement. They're not getting paid for this stuff, right? You just give them a little A, they smile. That same system starts in kindergarten, happy face, A, runs through there. F, no face, blank. Same thing would work in kindergarten. That form I use looks fair. I mean, I'm grading objectively, but the point is deeper, that what the knowledge is based on is my spot of power as the teacher. That's what it's based on. Now, you would go, oh no, it's based on what's really true. Yeah, but how does that get meted out and parsed out? Who decides that? Well, the blunt and ugly answer is we do. The teachers do. We decide. Now, there are clear counterexamples to Nietzsche's argument. In mathematics, at its simplest levels, I will grant you that if we're doing a mathematics course, I can grade objectively. But I will also grant you that nothing of great importance to human values hangs on truths that everyone can accept. That 2 + 2 is 4, that A is A, are all acceptable, and they're acceptable precisely because nothing of very great human importance hangs on them. The moment you go a little beyond that in any direction, even in math class, when you discuss, for example, the philosophy of mathematics, then the disputes start, and then power at some point has to insert itself and decide. So an important part of Nietzsche's investigation is in the interconnection between forms of knowledge and power. Forms of, for purposes of our course, forms of ethical behavior and power are the subject of his most important book. Well, maybe not his most important, but certainly the one that's the most coherent, on the genealogy of morals by Nietzsche. And in this book, and I'm going to talk about it just briefly, Nietzsche talks about not what's right and wrong in the way we did in previous lectures, good or bad actions, but the word genealogy talks about what were the origins of the situations within which we make the value judgments. In other words, from where did this distinction come? Good, bad, right, wrong, and so on. Now, Nietzsche's argument is rather abrasive. It's certainly provocative, and the genealogy of morals traces the moral form of discourse, good, bad, right, wrong, back to originally, and again, this is these 19th century Germans again, back to the Greeks. Now, here Nietzsche talks about the Greeks as having, and the word he uses is very important, and this will move us finally back to our account of the present. Nietzsche talks about the translation of virtue. What was virtue for the Greeks? Nietzsche was a philologist who could never get a normal job as a professor because he was a little nuts, okay? And anyway, that wouldn't have stopped him now, but it stopped him then. For the Greeks, virtue, when I said the word, I could see all of you go, oh, virtue. Yeah, it wasn't like that for the Greeks. I've already given you the Greek ideal of Odysseus, where virtue included the ability to be a clever liar. In other words, knowing when and who to con was important. That's not part of the Victorian idea of virtue, but it's part of the Greek ideal of it. And so virtue for them meant this excellence in being well-rounded. It meant to be excellent at revenge, so that unlike the Christian ideal of virtue, if someone strikes you, you strike them back, and the reason you do that is because if you don't, it will offend them worse. It will hurt their honor and yours. Much more virtuous to hit them back, and then both your honors are intact. It will only humiliate them to turn your face as though they were unworthy scum. Now hit them back. So Nietzsche discusses this use of virtue, and the Greek evaluation he calls noble. Now, noble for Nietzsche is not itself a term of value, but a kind of descriptive term of the way the Greeks evaluated. And he himself is not doing ethics the way I was doing it the other day. This is not, he's giving, as it were, a genealogy, a history of the way in which we've come to use these words. For Nietzsche, the key movement in the way the words good, bad, right, and wrong occur around the word virtue, and occur with the Christian transformation of virtue from something active based on excellence into something filled with what Nietzsche calls resentment. And I guess there's a simple way to make the argument, and I'm trying to keep my remarks here at a level where they are debatable. What he means is something like this. For the Greeks, you know, someone who was strong enough to sin went ahead and sinned, which meant they did what they wanted to and enjoyed it, and for the Greeks, that was good. The Christian idea of virtue, which includes the idea of guilt and sin, meant that you want to do something real bad and you don't, and then you're frustrated and filled with resentment towards those sinners who go ahead and do what they want to do. And you turn the name of your fault, cowardice, into a virtue. Really, you just didn't have the guts to go ahead and do what you wanted to do, trying to make it sound even slimier than it is. But this is Nietzsche's argument. You didn't have the strength to go ahead and pursue what you really wanted. And so your name for that inability is your virtue. You didn't do it. Well, we know that doesn't work out frequently, because we have several notorious cases. The Jimmy Swaggart case shows that the most virtuous sometimes fall. But it's worse than that. As Nietzsche says, this Christian notion of virtue is a double trap. Because let's suppose someone who has the strength to pursue excellence goes ahead and does what they want to do and finds satisfaction. Then, because the whole field within which right and wrong is understood in the Christian era is different than the whole field within which right and wrong is understood in the earlier period, when you go ahead and do that, then you pay another price, guilt. That's where you internally torment yourself for the very paradoxical and perverse reason that you did what you wanted to do. You go, damn, I'm so bad, I did what I wanted to do. You don't do what you want to do, and you feel, as it were, helpless, but a little bit smug, and then resentful towards others that do otherwise. That's resentment. Or you go ahead and do it, and then feel guilty and have resentment towards yourself. So Nietzsche talks about this reversal of values as a reversal of values from the Greek values. And the key word is virtue. Virtue is very differently understood in the Victorian era. And this is what Nietzsche talks about in the genealogy of morals, is one of the things the argument does, whether you like it or not, or whether you accept it or not, and I've only outlined it in a kind of a snide, quick way here today, whether you like it or not, the interesting part of Nietzsche's project is that what we could see, and I haven't done that in here, but what we could have presented as eternal problems of morality, in Nietzsche's account we become very aware that these so-called eternal problems change radically depending on where you happen to be in history. What gets called good is different if you happen to be in one society or one historical period and in another. Now that seems like